Clara woke up to the sound of chaotic screaming by the riverbank. Cold water dripped from her hair down to her neck, her clothes clinging tightly to her body. Before her eyes were the familiar faces of Riverton. Ethan stood not too far away, completely drenched. On the other side, Stella was lying in Brody's arms. Clara only needed one look to realize exactly when she had returned to. It was the day she and her sister had both fallen into the river, the very day their destinies diverged onto two completely different paths. In their previous life, Stella had adamantly claimed that Ethan had seen her body underwater, using her reputation to force him into marriage. Meanwhile, Clara had been saved by Brody, and later, because their mother fell ill, she was forced to accept the dowry from Brody's family. This time, the person lying in Brody's arms was Stella. After coughing a few times, she clung tightly to his arm. Her voice was weak but clear. "Brody, you saved me in front of all these people, and you carried me ashore. My reputation is ruined. We can't just pretend nothing happened." Brody was stunned for a moment, but a smirk quickly crept onto his face. He had always had his eye on Stella, but in the past, she had always dismissed him as crude and refused to even look at him. "Don't worry, Stella. I'm not the kind of guy who dodges responsibility." Clara pushed herself up and calmly watched the two of them. That single sentence was enough for her to understand. Stella had also come back in time. If she didn't remember their past life, she would absolutely never have given up Ethan to choose a man she used to despise. She only saw that Brody's family became wealthy later on, completely unaware that the capital, the supplier connections, and the trading routes were all actually built by Clara. Susan pushed her way through the crowd. Her face turned pale the moment she saw her daughter clinging to Brody. "Stella, have you lost your mind? Let go of him right now." Stella didn't let go. Instead, she pulled her mother aside and whispered rapidly into her ear. Clara couldn't hear every single word, but watching Susan's expression shift from angry to hesitant, and then gradually light up, she could easily guess what her sister had said. It wasn't long before Susan turned back around, her attitude completely changed. "If you two have feelings for each other, I don't want to stand in your way, but our daughter won't be married off carelessly. Brody's family needs to show some real sincerity." Brody immediately puffed out his chest. "Don't you worry, ma'am. My dad is the town mayor. We have plenty of food, and we've had a marriage fund set aside for a long time. Stella definitely won't suffer if she marries into our family." He purposefully spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. A few people praised Stella for being lucky, while others just scoffed. Everyone in Riverton knew that Brody was only good at riding on his father's coattails. He would work for half the morning, and then find a place to hide. Stella, however, looked incredibly pleased with what she heard. She tilted her head and looked at Clara, unable to hide the smugness in her eyes. "Clara, you were saved by Ethan too. He's an educated young man from the city, and his family is highly cultured. Aren't you going to thank him?" All eyes instantly shifted toward Clara and Ethan. Ethan frowned, but didn't rush to speak. Clara brushed the mud off her sleeve and said, "Saving a life is a great favor, and I will naturally thank him. But just because you decided to marry a man simply because he carried you ashore doesn't mean everyone else has to follow your example." The smile on Stella's face stiffened. "What do you mean by that? Are you saying Ethan saved you and doesn't need to take responsibility?" At that moment, Ethan finally stepped forward. "You two were about to drown. Anyone standing as close as I was would have jumped in to help. This has nothing to do with marriage, and no one should use their reputation to force the issue." Those words both protected Clara's reputation and shut down Stella's scheme. Stella, assuming Clara had just been rejected, immediately let out a laugh. "Clara, I'm only looking out for you, but it seems he doesn't want to get involved. Just don't regret it later." Clara looked at her and slowly replied, "The one who rushed to pick a husband the moment she woke up is you. Whether you'll regret it or not, you should worry about yourself first," Clara replied. Brody's face darkened. "Clara, you'd better speak a little more politely. Stella is about to be my wife. I know, which is why I'm wishing for you two to lock yourselves tightly together, so no one else has to suffer in your place," she said. A few chuckles broke out in the crowd. Before Brody could react, Susan hurriedly pulled her daughter away to discuss the dowry with his family. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Ethan took off his jacket and placed it on a nearby rock. "Your clothes are completely soaked. Put this on for now so you don't catch a cold. I'll wash it and return it to you," Clara said. He nodded without asking anything more, turned around, and walked toward the housing area for the educated youths. Stella intentionally lingered behind. When no one was nearby, she leaned in close to Clara and lowered her voice. "Clara, this time, I won't live a life of poverty in your place. Brody is going to be the first rich man in town, while Ethan's family is about to face a massive disaster. You can just cling to your educated youth and suffer. Clara pulled the jacket tighter around her shoulders and looked her straight in the eye. You remember the outcome, but you don't remember who created that outcome. Fine, go ahead and marry him. I'd like to see how Brody is going to strike it rich without me. Stella's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly let out a cold sneer. Right, you're just jealous. Sure, keep thinking that if it helps you sleep at night, Clara replied. She didn't bother arguing further. Since Stella had chosen her own grave, Clara wasn't going to pull her out. If anything, she might conveniently toss in a few shovels of dirt. Just then, Maggie came running from the end of the road, completely out of breath. Clara, hurry home. Your mother fainted when she heard you fell into the river. Clara immediately ran back home. Her mother, Mary, was lying on the earthen bed, her face deathly pale. Doctor. Evans, the local doctor, shook his head as he checked her pulse. Her old illness has flared up again. It's best to take her to the county hospital, but the medical and hospital fees won't be cheap. Mary had just regained consciousness and immediately grabbed Clara's hand. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. I just need to rest for a few days and I'll be fine. Don't go around borrowing money. In their past life, her mother had said the exact same thing. Clara had accepted Brody's family's dowry, trading her entire life for the money to treat her illness, but in the end, she still couldn't save her. Clara pulled the blanket up over her mother, speaking in a calm voice. Just rest, Mom. I'll figure out the medical expenses, but I'm not going to sell myself for money. Mary wanted to ask more, but Clara had already stood up to fetch some water. In the corner of the room, an old bamboo basket leaned against a pile of firewood. Clara's eyes stopped on it. Behind the mountains of Riverton, there was an area overgrown with medicinal herbs. In her previous life, thanks to a medical book she had found in Brody's family's storage, she had learned how to identify and process them, eventually selling them to a pharmacy in the county. This time, she didn't need Brody's family, nor did she need any dowry. Clara pulled the bamboo basket out and dusted off the straps. Tomorrow morning, she was going up the mountain. Before the sky had even fully brightened, Clara strapped the bamboo basket to her back and followed the small path behind the village up the mountain. She didn't take the usual firewood gathering route, but circled around the eastern slope, making her way to a hidden patch of land behind several large boulders. Clusters of astragalus, red sage, and atractylodes still grew in rows, mixed in with the weeds. In her past life, these very herbs had provided her with her initial capital. She used to think they grew wild, so she had picked them all at once and taken them down to the county to sell. This time, she brought a small knife, selecting only the mature plants. Wherever she dug, she made sure to leave the young roots and cover them back up with soil to avoid destroying the whole cluster. Clara had just pulled up a root of red sage when the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Clara, what are you doing? She turned around. Ethan was standing on the trail, a small hoe resting on his shoulder. His gaze paused on the herbs in her basket, then shifted to the soil she had just covered up. This is my family's herb garden, he said. My father asked some people in the village to plant them 2 years ago. Not many people come through here, so we didn't put up a fence. Clara immediately put the red sage root down, took all the herbs she had gathered in her basket, and placed them back beside the planting bed. I'm sorry, I thought they grew wild, she said. I will replant the ones I dug up. If they don't survive, I will compensate you. In her previous life, by the time she had found this place, Ethan's family had already met with disaster. The herb garden was left untended, so she had never known it had an owner. Ethan didn't stop her. He just bent down to inspect the spots she had just dug up. A moment later, he asked, Have you studied herb gathering before? I read an old medical book and taught myself, Clara replied. You read a book and knew to cut the old roots, keep the young shoots, and even remembered to cover them with soil to retain moisture? His voice wasn't mocking, but he clearly didn't entirely believe her. Clara picked up her knife and answered straightforwardly. It's not convenient for me to explain much. It's normal that you don't believe me, but the herbs belong to your family. I admit I took them by mistake. Just calculate the number of damaged plants and I will pay you back later. Ethan looked at her for a few more seconds, then sat down next to the herb bed. There's no need to replant them. The roots that have already been dug up will actually die if they are handled again. He picked up a piece of astragalus root, examined the cleanly cut section, and continued. My grandfather only uses a portion of these. If the rest aren't harvested in time, they will just overgrow and lose their value. You can pick them if you need them, but you have to help me sort and dry them properly. I won't take them for free, Clara said. After selling them, minus the portion your family needs to keep, we'll split the remaining money 70-30. Your family owns the land and the herbs, so you get 70%. The labor of gathering, processing, and finding a buyer is all yours, Ethan countered. A 50-50 split is more reasonable. 50-50 it is then. I won't be overly polite about it, she agreed. Fair trade makes for a lasting partnership, and I don't want to owe your family either. The two of them worked until the sky was completely bright. Clara was in charge of selecting the plants and cleaning off the dirt, while Ethan bundled the herbs by type. He worked very fast, only occasionally handing her a plant with a similar shape to test her. She identified all of them correctly. When they reached the final cluster of herbs, he finally spoke. My father also thought these herbs shouldn't go to waste. In a few days, my family is heading back to the city to take my grandfather for a medical checkup. We might have to stay there for a while. Clara's hands froze on the binding string. In her previous life, it was right after that trip that Ethan's family was investigated. Contraband was found in their home, and the entire family was dragged into a serious scandal. It took many years before they were finally cleared of the charges. She didn't know who had set the trap. She only remembered Stella once mentioning a flower pot being smashed during the search. Clara tied the bundle of herbs tightly and spoke up. Ethan, before you take your family away, you should thoroughly inspect your house. He looked over at her. Inspect it for what? Recently gifted potted plants, wall crevices, under the cabinets, and any objects of unknown origin that have suddenly appeared, she listed. Things have been unstable lately. It's better to be careful. Did you hear something? He asked. No, Clara replied. I just know that some disasters don't come on their own. They are secretly planted in your home by others. Ethan didn't press her for answers. He dropped his faint smile from earlier and nodded. I'll keep that in mind. They divided the herbs into 2 portions. The portion for Ethan's family was kept to be dried, while Clara took the rest down to the county to sell. Before she left, Ethan handed her an oilcloth to cover her basket. As soon as Clara reached the foot of the mountain, she ran into Stella and Susan walking up the path. Stella looked at the basket on Clara's back and immediately stepped forward. Where did you sneak off to this early in the morning? What's in the basket? Let me see. But the moment her hand touched the cover, she yanked it back. Before coming down the mountain, Clara had picked up some dry cow dung and scattered it on top, then covered it with grass to completely hide the herbs underneath. Stella wiped her hand on her pants in disgust. Did you crawl up the mountain just to pick the stuff up for the kitchen stove? You're completely hopeless. Poor people have their own ways of living, Clara replied. I don't have good luck like you do. That statement instantly brought the joy back to Stella's face. It's good that you know that. Brody's family has agreed to tailor 4 new outfits for me, and the wedding reception will have 20 tables. Brody even said he'd take me to live in the county town in the future. I won't have to be covered in mud all year round like the rest of the villagers. Susan, standing next to her, also smiled with absolute smugness. Some people are just born lucky. Others couldn't take it from them even if they tried, Susan said. Clara looked at the mother and daughter, intentionally feigning a look of regret. Then you'd better hold on to Brody tightly. A capable man like him will definitely attract a lot of girls. Stella immediately grabbed her mother's arm and urged her to walk faster, as if she were afraid that being even one step too slow would allow someone to swoop in and snatch Brody away. Clara waited until they were far away before brushing off the layer of cow dung, wrapping the herbs back up, and heading straight to the county town. The pharmacy owner's attitude completely changed the moment he test-cut a piece of astragalus root. The herbs were perfectly mature, and the roots were completely intact. Clara also clearly explained the drying methods and the specific uses for each type, so he couldn't lowball her. After some negotiation, she sold them for $32. Half of it belonged to Ethan's family. The rest was enough to cover the initial hospital admission fee for her mother and buy some extra medicine. Leaving the pharmacy, Clara stopped by the post office to buy paper, ink, and a few envelopes. Richard had been the town mayor for many years. There was no shortage of incidents where he had altered work points, embezzled food rations, and abused his official position to oppress others. In her past life, Clara had simply endured it because she was living with Brody's family. In this life, she could take her time writing down every single incident, find the right witnesses, and send the reports up to the county. She wasn't in a rush to make false accusations, nor did she need to fabricate a single word. The things Brody's family had done, once brought to light, would be enough to bury their entire household. The next morning, Clara took the money from the herbs to the county hospital and completed the admission procedures for her mother. Mary lay on the bed next to the window, her thin hands tightly gripping the edge of the blanket. Clara, where did you get so much money? Clara set the bag of medicine down and adjusted her mother's pillow. Stella lent it to me for now. I'll pay her back once you're better. Her mother sighed but ultimately didn't ask anything else. She was always afraid of becoming a burden. If she knew Clara had climbed the mountain to dig for herbs before dawn, she would have definitely demanded to be discharged immediately. The doctor said her condition wasn't life-threatening yet, but she needed to stay in the hospital for observation for a few days. Clara paid the bed and medication fees in advance, then returned to the village to fetch more clothes. As soon as she opened the door, Clara saw a cloth bag placed on the table. Maggie from the house next door heard the noise and walked over. Stella just brought that by. She said her wedding is tomorrow, and she wants you to wear a new outfit so you won't embarrass the family. Clara opened the bag and pulled out a dark red long-sleeved shirt and matching pants. The fabric wasn't cheap, and the hems were sewn neatly. At first glance, it really did seem sincere, but Stella had never been generous to her. Clara flipped the shirt inside out and gently pulled at the side seam. The stitches only went through the outer layer of fabric, leaving the inside practically bare. Just bending over a few times or being bumped into by someone would cause the entire section of fabric to tear open. Stella wanted her to be humiliated right in the middle of the wedding, in front of everyone in the village. A girl's reputation in this day and age was more important than anything else. As long as the shirt tore in the right place, even if she was the victim, the rumors would be enough to keep her from holding her head up for years. Clara folded the shirt back up and placed it in the bag exactly as it was. If Stella had gone through the trouble of preparing such a wonderful gift, Clara couldn't let it go to waste. That afternoon, Clara took the cloth bag to Brody's house. Brody came out to open the door. The moment he saw her, he immediately blocked the doorway, his face full of caution. "Clara, I'm marrying Stella tomorrow. Don't think that coming over here and clinging to me will make me change my mind." Clara looked him up and down. "You really overthink things. I'm just here to deliver something." Brody frowned. "Deliver what?" Clara held out the cloth bag. "Stella personally sewed a new outfit for your mother. She felt shy about trying to curry favor with her mother-in-law before even officially joining the family, so she asked me to bring it over." He opened the bag, looked at the color of the fabric, and immediately broke into a smile. "Stella really knows how to behave." Clara nodded in agreement. "She chose the color very carefully, and the fit is loose and comfortable. Your mother will definitely look great in it. Make sure you tell her it was made with all of Stella's heart. Don't let her efforts go unrewarded." Hearing Clara praise Stella, the last bit of suspicion on Brody's face finally disappeared. Barbara walked out of the house, and as soon as she heard there was a new outfit, she snatched the bag. This girl hasn't even walked through the door yet, but she already knows how to think of her mother-in-law. She seems quite thoughtful. She held the shirt up against herself. Her figure was fuller than Clara's, and the shirt was loosely tailored, so at a glance, it looked like a perfect fit. Clara smiled. "You should wear it tomorrow to greet the guests. Stella will definitely be happy to see it." Barbara had always loved to show off, so hearing this made her even more pleased. Having delivered the item, Clara left immediately, not staying a second longer. On the day of the wedding, Clara went to the hospital early in the morning. The nurses, the doctor, and the patients sharing the room all saw her there. She changed the bed sheets, fetched the medicine, and went to buy porridge for her mother, only leaving the hospital in the afternoon. By the time she reached the entrance of the village, gossip had already spread everywhere. Maggie ran over, pulling her aside, trying to hold back her laughter as she spoke. "It's really a pity you didn't go. Your cousin's mother-in-law lost so much face today." While greeting the guests, Barbara was wearing the new red outfit, walking back and forth in the middle of the courtyard. When she bent down to pick up a red envelope, the side seam suddenly burst open, and a huge chunk of the shirt tore apart right in front of over 100 people. She was both embarrassed and furious. She turned around and slapped Stella right there in the courtyard. Before Stella could even understand what was going on, she was scolded for intentionally sewing a faulty shirt to humiliate her mother-in-law. Brody defended his wife and argued back at his mother. Barbara got even angrier and almost flipped a whole table of wine onto the ground. The wedding wasn't even over, and the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had already turned against each other. After hearing this, Clara simply asked, "Was Stella badly hurt?" "No, not badly. But the whole village saw that slap." "That's good enough," Clara replied. Maggie gave her a look, as if wanting to ask something, but ultimately just smiled and returned home. Late that night, Clara had just finished boiling a pot of water when the sound of violent banging on the door echoed from the courtyard. Susan stormed in, gripping a bamboo broom in her hand. "Clara, you vicious wretch, you swapped the outfit to harm my daughter, didn't you?" Clara wasn't going to stand still and let her hit her. She immediately ran out into the courtyard, dodging while shouting loudly, "Aunt Susan, I've been at the hospital all day. What did I do to Stella that made you come here to beat me?" The commotion quickly drew the neighbors over. Maggie, a few elders, and even the village accountant were standing outside the gate. Seeing the crowd, Susan raised her voice even louder. "Stella clearly sewed that outfit for you, but you took it over to Brody's house and caused her to get beaten by her mother-in-law right on her wedding day." Clara stopped and looked her straight in the eye. "You're saying that outfit was originally meant for me?" Susan choked on her words. Clara didn't give her a chance to correct herself. If I had worn that outfit to the wedding, the seams would have burst open in front of the entire village. So, why did Stella sew it for me? The crowd immediately broke into a murmur. Maggie frowned. That's right. If the shirt was faulty from the start, doesn't that mean Stella wanted her cousin to lose all her dignity? Susan hurriedly changed her tune. No, her stitching just isn't very strong yet. How could she know it would tear? Clara picked up the cloth bag that had been left on the table and held it out. She told me this was a wedding gift for me. But I saw that the color was mature and the fit was loose, so I assumed she wanted to give it to her mother-in-law but was too shy to say it. I was just helping her deliver it. I had absolutely no idea there was a problem with the seams. After saying that, Clara took a step back. If you think I intentionally harmed anyone, we can take the shirt to the tailor at the cooperative tomorrow to have it inspected. They can see whether the threads were cut by someone later, or if it was loosely sewn right from the start. Susan immediately fell silent. She knew the shirt had been prepared by Stella's own hands. A careful inspection would only make everything completely obvious. Clara continued, her voice not loud but clear enough for everyone to hear. If you say the shirt was for me, then Stella deliberately harmed her cousin. If you say the shirt was for Brody's mother, then she deliberately humiliated her mother-in-law. Whichever explanation you choose, I'm all ears. Susan's face alternated between red and pale. She couldn't answer. Ultimately, she just threw the broom onto the ground and stormed off. Amidst the whispers, Clara closed the gate and brushed the dust off her sleeve. Stella had wanted to use an outfit to ruin Clara's reputation, but in the end, she had personally lit the match to burn down her own wedding day. Clara didn't need to add fuel to the fire. She only needed to return that gift to its rightful place. The next morning, a nurse from the county hospital had someone bring back news. Her mother's illness had temporarily stabilized, and she had passed the critical stage. As long as she continued her treatment, she wouldn't repeat the same tragic end as before. Clara clenched the note in her hand, then carefully placed it in her pocket. For the first time since coming back in time, a real tragedy had been changed. Less than 3 days after the wedding, the sound of arguments from Brody's house echoed all the way to the end of the alley. Stella had originally thought that the moment she stepped through those doors, she would immediately live the life of a rich woman. But aside from a house slightly larger than the others, a few extra sacks of grain in the courtyard, and a father-in-law holding the title of town mayor, everything was nothing like she had imagined. Brody didn't know how to do business, nor did he have any capital of his own. All his talk about going to the county town to open a store, importing goods from the city, or making a fortune off a single transport run were nothing but drunken boasts at the liquor table. After waiting for a few days without seeing him make a move, Stella finally couldn't hold back. When are you planning to start your business? Brody, who was lying on the bed smoking, frowned upon hearing this. Business isn't something you can just start because you say so. You have to wait for the right opportunity. What opportunity? You don't have a supplier, you don't have any connections in the county, and you only know a few taverns. What are you going to use to open a store? Those words hit right at his sore spot. Brody immediately sat up and threw his cigarette on the ground. You just married into this family, and you're already looking down on your husband? If you didn't believe I was capable, why did you cling to me before? Stella couldn't answer. She only remembered that in their previous life, Brody's family had money. She didn't know where their initial capital came from, or who the goods were sold to, and she certainly didn't know that the ledgers and trade connections were all entirely built by Clara. Before that conflict could even settle, their delayed wedding night turned into another chaotic disaster. The next morning, Stella showed up at Clara's house with half her face swollen and red and dark bruises on her wrists. As soon as Clara opened the gate, Stella pushed the door open forcefully and stormed in. Clara, you knew all along, didn't you? Clara set her water basin down. Knew what? Brody isn't even a man. You knew perfectly well he had a condition, yet you still watched me marry him. Her voice was entirely too loud. The houses in the village were packed closely together. Just that one sentence was enough to make several neighboring doors creak open. Clara looked out into the courtyard and intentionally asked back, "What do you mean my brother-in-law isn't a man? Did he hit you, or is there something else?" Stella immediately realized she had misspoken, but it was too late. Maggie, walking by with a basket of vegetables, stopped in her tracks. "Stella, who hit you in the face? You just got married and you're already like this?" Another woman lowered her voice, but just enough for everyone to hear. "I remember a few years ago, Barbara asked about a place that treats men's issues. At the time, she said she was asking for a distant relative. The person next to her immediately chimed in. What distant relative? She was probably asking for her son. The gossip spread like wildfire. In just a moment, there were more than 10 people gathered outside Clara's gate. Stella's face turned pale. She turned and glared at Clara. You yelled on purpose. Clara let out a laugh. You ran all the way to my house, and the first thing you said out of your mouth was that your husband isn't a man. I just asked for clarification. How does that become my fault? Right at that moment, Brody came rushing from the end of the road. He must have just heard the news. His face was flushed red, his eyes full of rage. Stella! Stella jumped in fright and backed away. Brody, listen to me explain. You dared to blab about our family's private matters in front of the whole village? He grabbed her arm roughly. Stella immediately pointed at Clara. It was her. She intentionally baited me into saying it and called everyone over to watch. She's jealous because I married you. She's wanted to ruin us from the start. Clara stood by the door with her arms crossed. Why are you blaming this on me? You're the one who came to my house. You're the one who said he had a condition. I didn't even have time to offer you a cup of tea before you spilled everything yourself. Brody turned to look at Clara, his eyes full of suspicion. Stella hurriedly continued. She has always been pining for you. That outfit last time was also intentionally brought over by her to harm your mother. Now she's spreading rumors to humiliate you. Isn't it just because she couldn't stand seeing me marry into your family? Clara looked at her and spoke slowly. Stop putting your husband on a pedestal. I already have someone in my heart, and I don't have the time to fight with you. Stella, acting as if she had caught a golden opportunity, immediately stepped forward. Who is this person in your heart? Tell us. If you can't name him, aren't you just making things up to cover your tracks? The crowd began to murmur again. In this day and age, when it came to matters between men and women, just one wrong word was enough to spark vicious rumors. Stella was trying to force Clara into a difficult corner. If she named someone who knew nothing about it, she would get a reputation for being loose. If she said nothing, Stella would insist that she was still hung up on Brody. Before Clara even needed to answer, a calm voice rang out from behind the crowd. The person she cares about is me. Everyone turned around in unison. Ethan was standing outside the gate with a middle-aged couple. The man was carrying a wooden medical box. He had a thin build, but his eyes were bright and steady. The woman beside him was dressed simply, holding a bag of fruit. Seeing them, Stella's expression instantly changed. According to the memories of her previous life, Ethan's family should have already been under investigation by now. Ethan shouldn't have been able to appear so openly alongside his parents like this. Brody let go of his wife's hand and asked coldly, Ethan, what do you mean by that? Ethan stepped forward and stood next to Clara. It means exactly what it sounds like. Clara doesn't have any relationship with you, much less the need to fight anyone over you. Stella bit her lip. Don't lie just because you want to help. Marriage isn't something you can just joke about. Right, Ethan replied. Which is why I am only confirming that she has no interest in your husband. As for whether we get married or not, that is between me and Clara. We don't need outsiders to decide for us. He spoke clearly, not forcing Clara to play along right in front of everyone, nor turning a rescue of her reputation into a sudden marriage proposal. The middle-aged man finally spoke up at this moment. I am Thomas, Ethan's father. My wife and I came here today to thank Clara. He set the wooden medical box down on the stone table in the courtyard. A few days ago, this young lady reminded Ethan to check our house for objects of unknown origin. We listened to her advice and found a package hidden under the soil in a potted plant that had recently been brought over by someone else. The crowd immediately fell silent. Thomas continued. We didn't touch it ourselves, but reported it straight to the authorities. They came, made a formal record, and confirmed that someone was trying to use that item to frame our family. If we had discovered it even a few days later, the consequences would have been hard to predict. Diane, Ethan's mother, stepped up and took Clara's hand. Clara, you saved our entire family this time. We brought some medicine for your mother, and after that, we'd like to discuss another matter with you. Clara looked over at Ethan. He simply said, we can talk about the future later. Today, I stepped forward because I didn't want you to be slandered by others. Those words made the elders standing nearby nod in approval. Compared to how Stella had used her reputation to force someone into taking responsibility, Ethan's attitude was much more upright and honorable. Stella stood in the middle of the courtyard, her face deathly pale. Brody hadn't struck it rich like she thought he would, and Ethan's family hadn't fallen into disaster like in their previous life. The two outcomes she was most certain of had both changed. Clara looked at her and intentionally asked, Do you still want to know who the person in my heart is? Stella didn't answer. Brody tightly gripped her wrist and dragged her away. Before leaving the gate, Brody gritted his teeth and warned, When we get home today, you better explain this clearly to me. Stella stumbled as she was pulled along, but her eyes remained glued to Ethan's family. For the first time since stealing Clara's marriage, she no longer had that smug look. Her dream of becoming a rich man's wife had just begun, yet unfixable cracks were already appearing. Thomas didn't rush to bring up the marriage matter again. After asking in detail about Mary's condition, he followed Clara to the county hospital first. He looked at the prescription and checked Mary's pulse for a long time before finally setting her wrist down. Her illness hasn't reached the point where she needs to use exclusively expensive medicine. There are 2 ingredients in this prescription that have almost the same effect. Using them at the same time only increases the burden on the body without helping her recover any faster. The doctor at the hospital was initially unhappy, but after hearing him analyze each medicinal herb, he eventually agreed to adjust the prescription. The cost of the medicine was reduced by almost half. Looking at the remaining money in Clara's hand, Mary's expression became noticeably more relieved. "Mr. Thomas, my family doesn't know how to properly thank you." Thomas smiled. "Clara helped our family avoid a massive disaster. This is nothing worth mentioning." He turned to look at the herbs Clara had brought along, picking up each bundle one by one to inspect them. "You know that astragalus must retain its main root. You know that red sage cannot be dried under harsh sunlight. And you even separated the plants with conflicting medicinal properties. Someone who has only read a book wouldn't be able to do it to this extent." Clara didn't explain further, simply saying, "I taught myself for a while. There are a few things I don't clearly remember the origins of, but I still know how the processing is done." Hearing this, he didn't press her for answers. "I want to take you in as my apprentice, not because you saved our family, but because you have a good eye and skilled hands. Most importantly, you know what should be taken and what must be left behind." Clara looked over at her mother. "I agree, but for now, I can't leave the village. My mother still needs someone to take care of her." "No one is forcing you to leave right away," Thomas said. "I will be staying in the county for a while. Whatever I can teach you first, I will teach you first." Clara bowed her head, formally greeting him as her master. From that day on, Clara began to study medicine properly and openly. During the day, she would go up the mountain or visit villagers' homes to buy medicinal herbs. In the afternoon, she brought them back to sort them, and at night, she recorded each type of plant, its harvest time, and processing methods. Thomas corrected every minor mistake she made, while Ethan took charge of contacting the pharmacies and obtaining letters of introduction. They didn't hide the process from the villagers like Brody's family had done in her past life. For anyone who brought herbs, Clara weighed them right in front of them, clearly recording the type, quality, and price. For those who didn't know how to harvest, she showed them how to cut the stems, keep the roots, and leave the young shoots. If the herbs didn't meet the standards, she explained the reason instead of lowballing them. At first, only a few people trusted them, but after 2 shipments sold at a good price, the number of people seeking them out grew larger and larger. Ethan was very good with bookkeeping. Clara only needed to check the quality, and he would calculate the money, record the seller's name, and arrange the transportation. The 2 of them worked together almost without needing to speak much. Once, Clara took one look at a basket of attractalodes and shook her head. The bottom part was soaked in water. It needs to be separated. He immediately moved the basket aside without asking a single question. Another time, a county pharmacy tried to force the price down, assuming goods from the countryside would be uneven in quality. Ethan placed his ledger on the table, clearly pointing out each batch, the harvest time, and the shrinkage rate. The shop owner couldn't find a single flaw to pick at and ultimately had to pay the exact price. While they were gradually stabilizing their purchasing business, Brody's family was continuously running into trouble. Stella refused to believe that Brody was just a braggart. Time and time again, she pushed him to do business, even listing a few items that had helped his family make money in their previous life. However, she only remembered that Brody's family used to sell herbs, fabrics, and dried goods. She didn't know where to buy them or when to sell them, much less which items were prone to spoiling. Goaded by his wife, Brody secretly took money from Richard's cabinet and went up to the county town to buy a batch of dried mushrooms. He saw they were cheap and bought the entire lot without checking their moisture content. By the time he brought them back, over half of the goods had already molded from the inside out. Not a single shop would accept them. When Richard discovered the missing money, he gave his son a vicious beating right in the middle of the courtyard. Afterward, he turned on Stella, demanding she bring back her entire dowry to cover the debt. Upon hearing the news, Susan rushed over to Brody's house and sat in the middle of the courtyard, cursing at them for the entire afternoon. "Once the dowry money reaches the bride's family, it belongs to the bride's family. Your son made a stupid business deal in. What grounds are you forcing my daughter to pay for it?" Barbara refused to back down either. If your daughter hadn't been egging him on every single day to get rich, would he have dared to steal the money? We really married a jinx. In less than half a month, the 2 in-law families had turned into bitter enemies. The news reached the purchasing spot while Clara was inspecting a batch of red sage. Maggie laughed as she recounted the story. Stella even said Brody would sooner or later become the first rich household. Now the goods haven't even sold, and the debt has already arrived at their door. Clara didn't laugh along. She simply continued test-cutting the roots. In their previous life, Brody's family's initial capital hadn't come from Brody at all. Clara was the one who had discovered the medicinal herbs, scraped together every penny, selected the suppliers, and meticulously recorded the prices at every market session. Only after there was a guaranteed profit did Brody use his title as the town mayor's son to step forward and handle the transactions. He spoke loudly and had a wide network of acquaintances, so everyone assumed he was the one who built the enterprise. Stella had managed to steal the man known as a wealthy household, but she couldn't steal the person who actually created that wealth. A few days later, Stella showed up at the purchasing spot. She stood staring at the baskets of medicinal herbs filling the courtyard, a clear shift in her eyes. "Clara, you're making quite a bit from this, aren't you?" "Just enough to pay everyone's wages," Clara replied. "We are sisters. How about you let me invest a share? I can help you collect the goods." Clara set her scale down. "You don't know anything about herbs, and you don't have any capital. What exactly do you plan to invest with?" Stella's expression stiffened. "I can learn." Someone who genuinely wants to learn would ask how to identify the plants, not how much money can be made. Stella lowered her voice. "Don't forget that private trading is still very sensitive right now. If I report to the superiors that you're secretly collecting goods for profit, do you think you'll be able to keep doing this?" Clara pulled open the desk drawer, took out a letter of introduction stamped with a red seal, and placed it in front of her sister. "We are authorized by the county pharmacy to purchase these herbs, and the local authorities have confirmed this collection point. The ledgers, prices, and quantities are all thoroughly recorded." Clara pushed the paper toward her. "What exactly do you want to report? Are you going to report that we are operating strictly within our permits, or are you going to report that the villagers have a little extra money to buy food?" Stella stared at the red smile, her lips pressed tightly together. Clara pulled the paper back, her voice turning icy. "If you want to make money, learn how to do it yourself. If you want to wedge your way in and take a cut for free, the door is closed. And if you feel like reporting me, go ahead and write your name clearly on the complaint. I'll keep it so we can easily confront each other later." Stella stood frozen for a few seconds before turning around and walking away. Before stepping out of the gate, she glanced back at the baskets of herbs once more. Her eyes no longer held simple jealousy. She was finally beginning to understand that the person she needed to rob wasn't Brody, but realizing it now was far too late. After being completely shut down by Clara at the collection point, Stella didn't show her face again for several days. However, she began to secretly stalk Clara. Clara noticed it starting from the second time she spotted fresh footprints outside the storage room window, followed by a misaligned door latch. After Clara returned from the hospital one day, the ledger recording the suppliers and purchase prices was still sitting in its exact usual spot, but the edges of the pages had clearly been flipped through by someone. Clara didn't tell anyone. She simply swapped the real ledger into a locked wooden box and placed a different notebook inside the desk drawer. Inside this decoy notebook, there were still names of herbs, purchase prices, quantities, and a few collection locations. The only difference was that the most critical steps, such as the required drying times and how to properly maintain the moisture levels, how to separate the old roots, and methods to prevent molding were all omitted. Anyone who knew the trade would see at a glance that the notebook was missing a lot of crucial information. However, to someone who only wanted to make a quick buck, it looked exactly like a shortcut. 3 days later, the notebook disappeared. Clara didn't go looking for it. Less than a week later, Brody's household was in an uproar again. Stella, relying on what she had copied down, pressured Brody into borrowing money to buy a massive amount of astragalus and atractalodes from several neighboring villages. She claimed that as long as they gathered enough goods, they could take them to the county pharmacy and sell them for double the price. Brody still hadn't forgotten his previous loss, but after a few goading remarks from his wife, his competitive pride flared up. He borrowed money under his father's name, hired a truck to transport the goods back, and piled everything into the sealed storage room behind their house. The still damp herbs were piled in heaps, and the storage room doors were kept shut for 2 whole days. By the time they opened it, the bottom layers had already heated up, and the stench of mold billowed straight out. Almost the entire batch was ruined, and the pharmacy refused to accept even a single pound. That morning, Brody returned in a fit of rage. The sound of smashing furniture and Stella's crying echoed throughout the entire afternoon. Barbara even forced her to carry water, chop wood, and cook for the whole family, cursing her out the entire time she ordered her around. "Ever since this family welcomed you through the door, not a single good thing has happened. You really are a jinx." The next morning, Stella showed up at the purchasing point with a dark purple bruise on one cheek. She threw the notebook down on the table. "Clara, you intentionally wrote it wrong to sabotage me." Clara looked at the cover of the notebook, then looked up. Why is my notebook in your hands? There were still several people standing around waiting to weigh their herbs. Maggie and 2 neighboring families heard her loud and clear. Stella froze. Clara opened the notebook and flipped through a few pages. I kept this in my desk drawer. How did you get it? I found it, Stella stammered. You found it? Inside my house? Clara asked. The people standing nearby immediately exchanged glances. Niha. Stella's face stiffened. It doesn't matter where I got it. Didn't you write these things down just to bait me? Clara let out a laugh. The notebook only contains the names of the goods and their prices. I never told you to buy them, much less told you to pile damp herbs into a sealed storage room. She pushed the notebook back toward Stella. You took my belongings yourself, spent money to buy the goods yourself, ruined them, and now you come back here to blame me. This is the definition of a thief crying thief. Maggie couldn't hold it back and burst out laughing. Stella's face flushed bright red, but she couldn't admit to sneaking into Clara's house. She snatched the notebook back and stormed off amidst the mocking stares of the crowd. Clara didn't try to stop her. The real trap had never been in the notebook. It lay in Stella's own greed. Someone who didn't understand the trade, but wanted to swallow all the profits whole, would sooner or later choke themselves to death. While Stella continued to wrestle with her mounting debt, Clara moved on to another task. The letters of complaint against Richard needed clearer evidence than just her own testimony. One by one, she visited the households that had their work points unreasonably deducted, the families forced to hand over extra grain rations, and the people who had to bring gifts to the mayor's house in exchange for lighter work. At first, no one dared to speak. Clara didn't pressure them. She simply recorded the time, the number of work points altered, and the names of the people present on those days. When they saw that she wasn't making empty promises, nor planning to use their words to stir up immediate trouble, they finally began to open up one by one. It was Maggie who gave her the most crucial lead. She pulled Clara inside her house, closed the door, and only then did she speak. A few years ago, there was a widow at the end of the village who was cornered by Richard in the grain storehouse. Afterward, she requested to move to another village that very night. Does anyone else know about this? Clara asked. Yes, just me and the old accountant, Maggie replied. But he threatened us, saying that if we opened our mouths, he would cut off our entire family's food rations. Clara wrote down the woman's name but didn't go looking for her right away. Ethan helped her organize all the testimonies in chronological order. Ethan divided each issue into categories, cross-referencing them with the work point ledger and food ration tickets to ensure the complaints weren't just filled with emotional hearsay. They made multiple copies. One copy was sent directly to the county, another was passed along by someone at the pharmacy, and the last one was mailed from a different post office just in case the letters were intercepted. Less than half a month later, Richard began to hear rumors that someone was asking about the village's ledgers. He couldn't find any evidence pointing directly to Clara, but he immediately retaliated against her mother. Their family's food rations were cut by almost half, and Mary's work points from the previous months were altered to a much lower number. Clara didn't go to his house to ask him in private. On the morning the rations were distributed, she brought her old tickets and notebook out into the middle of the communal courtyard. Mayor Richard, I want to double-check my mother's work points. Richard, sitting behind the desk, let his expression turn cold. The ledger is already finalized. What is there to check? Because the numbers in the ledger don't match the tickets that were distributed earlier. Clara placed the 2 pieces of paper side by side. 12 work points have been turned into 7. 3 days of labor with the corn planting team have been completely erased, and the food rations were reduced exactly, according to the altered numbers. The villagers immediately crowded around them. Richard yelled at the accountant, "Explain how you recorded this." The village accountant's face turned pale. Clara pulled out several other cross-referenced copies and placed them on the table. It's not just my family. The Harris family's points were altered twice. The Thompson family lost 4 days of labor, and Widow Miller had her food rations cut after she asked to change her work assignment. Clara looked Richard straight in the eye. With this many coincidences, are you planning to pin all the blame on the accountant alone? The crowd began to buzz with noise. Those who had been wronged stepped forward one by one to confirm it. Unable to withstand the pressure, the village accountant finally mumbled, "The mayor told me to change them." The communal courtyard instantly fell silent. Richard slammed his hand on the desk and stood up, but before he could say anything, the sound of vehicles echoed from outside the gate. 3 county officials walked in, carrying briefcases and copies stamped with official seals. The man leading them opened a stack of papers, scanned the crowd, and said, "We have received multiple reports regarding the alteration of work points, the embezzlement of food rations, and the abuse of power here in Riverton." He set the stack of documents down right in front of Richard. "Mayor Richard, we ask for your cooperation in this investigation." Clara stood amidst the crowd, watching his expression shift bit by bit. This time, no one could help him alter the numbers that had already been brought to light. The investigation in Riverton dragged on for several days. The county officials cross-referenced the work point ledgers, the food ration tickets, and the testimonies of every single household. The numbers that Richard had arbitrarily changed finally had people stepping forward to verify them. He had not only embezzled communal food rations, but he also accepted gifts in exchange for swapping heavy labor for lighter work, and forced the villagers to hand over extra produce before he would sign their confirmation papers. The times Brody had picked fights, beaten people, or stolen supplies from the production team had all been covered up by his father using his position as mayor. Richard was immediately suspended from his duties, pending further investigation. As soon as the news spread, the people who had been bullied by Brody sought out the county officials one after another. Some had been beaten by him for refusing to yield the ox cart. Others had their goods taken by him without payment. In the past, they hadn't dared to speak up out of fear that the mayor would deduct their work points. With his father no longer there to back him up, Brody couldn't maintain his arrogant swagger for long. The creditors from the county also tracked him down at his house. The loans he had taken out to buy the dried mushrooms and medicinal herbs were due, but the goods were completely moldy and couldn't be sold for a single cent. In Brody's family courtyard, the arguing lasted from morning until night. Barbara slammed her hand on the table, pointing straight at Stella. Ever since you walked through the doors of this house, not a single good thing has happened. The money is gone, the goods are ruined, and you dragged Brody's reputation through the mud all over the village. If you aren't a jinx, then what are you? Stella's hair was a mess, and the old bruises were still visible on her face. The business failed because your son is incompetent. Your husband is being investigated because of his own wrongdoings. What does any of that have to do with me? Barbara lunged forward and slapped her. Brody stood to the side, not intervening at all, and coldly ordered his wife to figure out a way to earn money to pay off the debt. That night, Stella grabbed her clothes and fled back to her mother's house. When Susan saw her daughter standing outside the door, she immediately slid the latch shut. "Mom, open the door for me. You've already married into Brody's family. If there's an issue, go back there and resolve it. They beat me and are forcing me to pay their debts." Susan stood behind the door, her voice lowered. "If you move back here for good, his family will demand the dowry back. Most of that money has already been spent. What am I supposed to use to pay them back?" Stella pounded on the door a few more times, but there was no response from inside. She couldn't go home to her mother, nor did she dare return to Brody's house immediately. Finally, she sought out the medicinal herb collection point. Clara was currently checking the inventory ledger. Ethan had just taken a shipment down to the county. In the courtyard, there were only Clara and 2 people drying herbs in the back. Stella walked in and threw her bag of clothes onto the ground. "Clara, are you satisfied now?" Clara set her pen down. "Brody's family is being investigated for the things they've done. Whether I'm satisfied or not has no effect on that. You knew everything beforehand." Stella took a step forward, her voice trembling with anger. "You were reborn too. You knew what kind of person Brody is. You knew his house was a living hell, so why didn't you stop me?" Clara looked at her for a moment before replying. "The day we fell into the river, the person clinging to Brody was you. The person who said he saw her body and had to take responsibility was also you. No one forced you to lie, and certainly, no one forced you to steal that marriage. But you knew I would suffer. I knew." Clara didn't deny it. "Then why did you watch me jump right in?" "Because it was what you fought for at all costs." Stella let out a laugh, but tears streamed down her face. "In our past life, you lived comfortably in Brody's family, while I had to suffer with Ethan's family. You owe me." Clara stood up and looked straight at her. "The things that happened in that storage room at Brody's house belong to our past life, but I remember every single face and every single threat clearly. You saw that Brody's family had money, so you assumed I lived comfortably." Clara spoke slowly, not giving her a chance to interrupt. "Brody beat me every time he lost face. Barbara treated me like a servant. Richard cornered me in the storehouse. If I hadn't managed to grab a knife to defend myself, you can guess what would have happened." Stella's face gradually turned deathly pale. "Every single penny Brody's family earned was because I gathered the herbs, found the suppliers, kept the ledgers, and managed the capital. Brody just stood on the sidelines and took the credit. I endured the beatings and the humiliation, working for his entire family. And right when I was about to escape, you showed up." Clara looked straight into her eyes. "You didn't come to save me. You killed me to steal that money." Stella took a step back. "You remember." "I remember," Clara said. "I remember exactly how you pushed me down the stone steps. You took the bag of money and walked away, leaving me lying there." Stella looked around in panic, then suddenly lunged forward. "Clara, shut your mouth." Clara leaned to the side to dodge, simultaneously grabbing Stella's wrist tightly. Stella struggled violently, but couldn't break free. The sound of footsteps echoed from outside the gate. Ethan had returned with Maggie and the two people who had just delivered goods. He saw their posture and quickly walked over. "What's going on?" Clara let go of Stella and brushed off her sleeve. "She tried to hit me." Maggie immediately stepped in to block her. "In broad daylight, and you still dare to come here and cause trouble?" Seeing outsiders, Stella didn't dare bring up the topic of rebirth again. She just gritted her teeth. "This is between us sisters. The moment you raised your hand, it stopped being a private matter," Clara said, pointing toward the gate. "If you come here again to hit people, steal things, or threaten me, I will report you to the police. Next time, it won't just be a few words of warning." Stella picked up her bag of clothes, turned around, and walked away. But that conversation didn't end there. Brody had been standing outside the fence for who knows how long. He hadn't heard everything, but he had clearly heard Stella say she chose him because she knew he would become a rich man. That night, he dragged her back home and forced her to tell him how to strike it rich. Stella mentioned medicinal herbs, dried goods, fabrics, and transport runs to the county town. However, she only remembered what Brody's family used to sell. She didn't know where to buy them, when to pick them, or how much capital was needed. For every question Brody asked, she was left speechless. He finally understood that his newly wedded wife didn't love him, nor did she believe in his abilities. She only saw him as a doorway leading to a life of wealth. The two of them got into a physical fight right in the courtyard. The neighbors had to call the officials stationed in the village to intervene. When they inspected the storage room in the back, they also discovered some undocumented goods that Brody had hidden away after his failed purchasing attempts. Coupled with the testimonies regarding his past assaults, he was taken away for questioning and dealt with according to each of his offenses. Richard was also taken up to the county for further investigation. The mayor's seat that he had relied on for so many years could no longer be kept. Barbara sat in the middle of the empty house, crying and cursing her daughter-in-law. Stella stood outside in the courtyard. She no longer had her birth mother to take her in, nor did she have a husband or father-in-law to rely on. She had managed to steal Brody just as she wanted, but unfortunately, the dream of being a rich man's wife had never belonged to him from the very beginning. After Richard was taken to the county, Riverton appointed a temporary mayor. The workpoint ledgers were re-examined, and the food rations that had been cut from various households were returned one by one. Clara's mother's illness grew more stable by the day. Thomas adjusted her medication 2 more times before confirming she could leave the hospital, as long as she rested and took her medicine on time. On the day they brought her mother home, he brought up the matter of returning to the city. "My work over there has been sorted out. If you want to study medicine properly, you should come with us. The city has hospitals, medicinal herb warehouses, and many more cases for you to observe." Clara didn't refuse. "I will go, but my mother has to come with me." "That's not a problem," Thomas said. "Diane has already asked around and found a room near our house. She also needs regular checkups, so being in the city will be more convenient." Hearing this, Mary was still hesitant. She was afraid she wouldn't be used to life outside the village, and even more afraid of becoming a burden to Clara. Clara simply said, "Wherever you are, I am. I'm not going to study medicine just to leave you behind in the village." Mary didn't object any further. In the days leading up to their departure, Ethan came over to help fix the roof and reorganize the collection point. They handed the ledgers over to 2 literate households and agreed on pricing with the county pharmacy to ensure the purchasing wouldn't stop after Clara left. That evening, he walked her home from the herb storage and stopped outside the gate. "My parents are both very fond of you," he said. Clara turned to look at him. "And you? You didn't stand in front of the whole village and say those words just to save me from a tight spot?" Ethan didn't beat around the bush, but he didn't take a step closer either. "I want to marry you. However, I know you aren't ready yet." She had once stepped into a marriage for the sake of her mother's medical bills, backed into a corner by her reputation and circumstances with no way out. In this life, she didn't want to trade one form of coercion for a debt of gratitude. "Ethan, I won't marry you just because you saved me, nor because your family helped treat my mother. I want to finish my studies, stand firmly on my own 2 feet, and then think about starting a family. If you need a promise right now, I can't give it to you." He fell silent for a moment, then nodded. "I don't need you to repay a favor. When you truly want to build a family with me, we will talk." They didn't come because Clara was about to become the daughter-in-law of Ethan's family, but because the herb purchasing business had helped many families earn extra money to buy medicine and food. Maggie stuffed a bag of pastries into Mary's hands. "Take care of your health when you go to the city. When Clara becomes a great doctor, remember to come back and examine us." Clara smiled. I don't know if I'll become a great doctor, but if anyone harvests herbs and destroys the roots, I'll still come back and scold them." Everyone burst out laughing, and the heavy atmosphere of parting was lightened. Before the bus arrived, the county officials announced the initial investigation results. Richard was dismissed from his position as town mayor and forced to return the food rations and money he had embezzled. His more serious offenses were transferred to the relevant authorities for further processing. Barbara was forced to sell off their furniture and livestock to pay the debts under Brody's family's name. Brody was dealt with for causing injury, embezzling collective property, and hoarding goods of unknown origin. Without his father as the mayor, he could no longer act like a tyrant. Clara thought everything was over, but just as the bus reached the edge of Riverton, Stella suddenly ran out to block the road. She had lost a lot of weight, her clothes were wrinkled, and there was an unhealed bruise on her neck. "Don't think you've won," she said. Clara set her luggage down. "What else do you want to say?" Stella shot back. "Brody is just having bad luck. Wait a few more years and he will still become the first rich man in the village. When that time comes, I'll still be better off than you." Clara looked at her, not knowing whether to call it stubbornness or sheer stupidity. "If he is truly capable, why is it that after I left, he couldn't even sell a single ounce of medicinal herbs?" Stella froze. Clara continued. "You remember that Brody's family used to sell herbs, open a store, and move to the city. But do you remember who identified the herbs? Who kept the ledgers, who found the suppliers, and who managed every single penny of the initial capital?" Stella's lips trembled. "It was you." Clara confirmed. "It was me." Stella looked at the people who had come to see Clara off, and then at the carts of herbs waiting to be transported to the county. She finally understood that the thing she had stolen was merely the name standing in the spotlight. The person who created everything had never been Brody. Her expression shifted rapidly. The initial hatred vanished, replaced by a familiar, calculating look. "Clara, we are still sisters," she said. "Just show me how to purchase the herbs. I can help you stay behind and watch over the collection point. When we make money later, we'll split it 50-50. Clara let out a laugh. "In our previous life, you killed me to steal my money. In this life, you stole my notebook, slandered me, and tried every way to drag me down. Now that you see there's a profit to be made, you want to be sisters again?" Stella hurriedly said, "I can change." Clara replied, "You should save those words to save yourself." She picked up her luggage. "I didn't push you into Brody's family, nor did I stop you from leaving. But if you want me to reach out and pull you up, keep dreaming." Just as Stella was about to step forward, Ethan stepped in to block her, standing by Clara's side. Stella didn't dare make a scene in front of the officials and the villagers. She could only watch them get on the bus. As the bus left Riverton, Ethan pulled an old book out of his luggage bag. "My father told me to give this to you." Clara took it, and just by looking at the cover, she recognized it. It was the same medical book she had found in Brody's family's storage in her previous life. Back then, she had to study it in secret by the light of an oil lamp, listening for footsteps outside the door while trying to memorize every page. This time, she didn't need to hide it under a pile of straw. She could openly and properly call Thomas her master, walk into a hospital, and learn the things she previously could only grope for in the dark. 3 years later, Clara completed her initial training and stayed on to work at her master's traditional medicine clinic. Her mother had recovered well and even helped Diane tend to the small herb garden behind the house. Ethan never rushed her about marriage. They studied together, worked together, and later opened a clinic dedicated to treating impoverished women and people from remote areas who couldn't afford medical care. It wasn't until the clinic could operate on its own that Clara finally agreed to marry Ethan. Their wedding wasn't grand. There was no one using their reputation to force the marriage, no dowry traded for medical bills, and no empty promises that a man would simply hand her a beautiful life. Many years later, Clara heard that Stella had finally left Brody's family after a long period of bitter disputes. She never became a rich man's wife, and Brody never managed to build anything of his own. Stella had managed to swap husbands, but she couldn't swap for Clara's competence, her clear-headedness, or the years she had dedicated to learning. Brody was never the one who would have made Clara wealthy, and Ethan wasn't the one who handed her a future. Other people could steal a marriage, a house, or a title, but they could never steal the knowledge inside her head, the path she had forged with her own hands, or her right to choose her own destiny.
Someone might steal your spot, but they can never steal the skills and inside your head. Success doesn't magically appear from a fancy, it comes from the grind of building things from the ground up. Instead of looking for shortcuts or relying on others, equipping yourself with real capability is the ultimate safety net. What do you guys think of Clara's epic comeback? Let me know in the comments.